Assassinations that shocked history. 1. The assassination of Julius Caesar, the fall of a titan. On March 15th, 44 BCE, the infamous Ides of March, Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, walked into the Senate and met his doom. Caesar, a military genius and statesman, had transformed the Roman Republic into a burgeoning empire, amassing unprecedented power as dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. His reforms, military victories, and centralization of authority earned him both fervent admirers and bitter enemies. To a group of senators led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus, Caesar's dominance threatened the very essence of the Republic. A system built on shared governance rather than autocracy, the conspiracy, known as the Liberatores, comprised over 60 senators who believed that assassinating Caesar was the only way to restore Rome's republican ideals. On that fateful day, Caesar entered the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was convening, seemingly unaware of the plot despite warnings from a soothsayer and his wife, Calpurnia, who had dreamt of his death. As he took his seat, the conspirators struck. Tillius Cimber approached Caesar under the pretense of presenting a petition, signaling the others to act. They drew their daggers and stabbed him 23 times. According to legend, Caesar resisted until he saw Brutus, his protege and rumored illegitimate son, among the attackers. Uttering "Et tu, Brute?" and "You, Brutus?" he succumbed, collapsing at the base of Pompey's statue. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The assassins fled, expecting public support that never materialized. Instead, Caesar's death sparked outrage and civil war. His heir, Octavian, later Augustus, allied with Mark Antony to defeat the conspirators at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Far from saving the Republic, the assassination hastened its end, ushering in the Roman Empire under Augustus. Caesar's death became a symbol of betrayal and the fragility of power. Immortalized by Shakespeare and etched into the Western imagination as a cautionary tale of ambition and treachery. The assassination's legacy is profound. It marked the end of the Roman Republic, a system that had lasted nearly 500 years, and set the stage for imperial rule. Caesar's name became synonymous with absolute authority, reflected in titles like Tsar and Kaiser, while the Ides of March remains a cultural shorthand for impending doom. This single act of violence not only reshaped Rome, but also influenced political thought for centuries, raising perennial questions about the morality of assassination as a tool for change. 2. The assassination of Empress Sisi, a tragic end to a free spirit. On September 10, 1898, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known affectionately as Sisi, was strolling along the promenade of Lake Geneva in Switzerland when her life was abruptly ended. Sisi, the wife of Emperor Franz Joseph I, was a figure of ethereal beauty and restless independence, often at odds with the stifling Habsburg court. By her mid-60s, she had become a wandering soul, traveling Europe to escape the constraints of royal life and mourning the suicide of her son, Crown Prince Rudolf, in 1889. Her tragic aura and enigmatic charm made her a beloved yet elusive icon. The assassin was Luigi Lucchesi, a 25-year-old Italian anarchist with a deep-seated hatred for monarchy and privilege. Lucchesi had originally targeted Prince Philippe of Orléans, but when that plan fell through, he turned his attention to Sisi after learning she was in Geneva. Armed with a sharpened file, he waited near the Hotel Beau Rivage, where Sisi was staying incognito. As she walked to a steamer with her lady-in-waiting, Countess Irma Staré, Lucchesi rushed forward and stabbed her in the chest. The weapon pierced her heart, but the wound was so narrow that Sisi initially felt little pain and continued walking to the boat. Only minutes later did she collapse, dying shortly after aboard the steamer at age 60. Lucchesi's motive was ideological rather than personal. He later declared, "I wanted to kill a royal, it didn't matter which one." His act was part of a broader wave of anarchist violence sweeping Europe in the late 19th century, targeting symbols of aristocracy and power. At his trial, he expressed no remorse, even requesting the death penalty. Switzerland had abolished it, and was sentenced to life in prison, where he hanged himself in 1910. Sisi's assassination shocked Europe, not only for its brutality, but also for its randomness. Her death deepened the Habsburg dynasty's aura of tragedy, already marred by Rudolph's suicide and the earlier execution of Franz Joseph's brother Maximilian in Mexico. Franz Joseph was devastated, reportedly saying, "I am spared nothing." The event heightened fears of anarchism, prompting stricter security for royalty across the continent. Sisi's legacy, however, endured as one of grace and sorrow. Her life, marked by beauty, rebellion, and loss, became a romantic legend, inspiring films, books, and a lasting fascination with her unconventional spirit. The assassination underscored the vulnerability of even the most sheltered figures and highlighted the turbulent undercurrents of a changing world. 3. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln. A nation divided mourns on April 14, 1865, just days after the Confederate surrender at Appomattox ended the American Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln was fatally shot at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, had guided the nation through its bloodiest conflict, preserving the Union and issuing the Emancipation Proclamation to abolish slavery. His leadership made him a revered figure in the North, but a hated symbol of defeat in the South, where resentment festered among Confederate sympathizers. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was a 26-year-old actor and Southern loyalist who saw Lincoln as a tyrant responsible for the South's ruin. Booth had initially plotted to kidnap Lincoln and exchange him for Confederate prisoners, but as the war ended, he shifted to murder. On Good Friday, he learned Lincoln would attend a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. With accomplices targeting Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward, both attacks failed. Booth entered the presidential box around 10:15 p.m. He fired a single shot from a .44 caliber Derringer pistol into the back of Lincoln's head, then leapt to the stage, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants," before fleeing despite breaking his leg in the fall. Lincoln lingered unconscious for 9 hours, dying at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th at the Peterson House across the street. Booth escaped into the night, sparking a 12-day manhunt across Maryland and Virginia. On April 26th, Union soldiers cornered him in a barn near Port Royal, Virginia. Refusing to surrender, he was shot by Sergeant Boston Corbett and died hours later. His co-conspirators were captured and executed or imprisoned. The assassination plunged the United States into mourning. Lincoln's death, just as peace dawned, was a gut punch to a nation hoping to heal. His funeral train traveled 1,600 miles from Washington to Springfield, Illinois, with millions lining the tracks to pay respects. The loss of Lincoln's steady hand during Reconstruction allowed harsher policies to dominate, deepening racial and regional divides. Booth had hoped to revive the Confederacy, but his act cemented its defeat, turning Lincoln into a martyr for unity and freedom. The assassination reshaped American identity, embedding Lincoln as a symbol of sacrifice and resilience, while Ford's Theater remains a somber monument to that dark night. 4. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. The loss of a peacemaker. On January 30th, 1948, Mahatma Gandhi, the revered leader of India's independence movement, was assassinated in New Delhi, silencing a voice that had inspired millions through nonviolence. Gandhi, then 78, had spent decades advocating for India's freedom from British rule, achieving it in 1910 through peaceful resistance. Partition, however, split the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, unleashing communal violence between Hindus and Muslims that Gandhi worked tirelessly to quell. His calls for unity and his fasts to stop the bloodshed earned him both adoration and enmity from extremists, who saw his tolerance as weakness. The assassin was Natharam Godse, a 37-year-old Hindu nationalist and member of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, a right-wing group opposed to Gandhi's conciliatory stance toward Muslims. Godse blamed Gandhi for partition's chaos, believing his policies favored Muslims at Hindus' expense. On that evening, Gandhi was walking to a prayer meeting at Birla House when Godse approached. Bowing briefly, Godse fired 3 shots from a Beretta pistol at point-blank range, hitting Gandhi in the chest and abdomen. Gandhi collapsed, uttering, "Hey Ram, oh God," and died within 30 minutes, surrounded by grieving followers. Godse surrendered immediately, later justifying his act at trial as a defense of Hindu interests. Convicted of murder, he was hanged on November 15, 1949, alongside accomplice Narayan Apte, despite pleas for clemency from Gandhi's sons. The assassination stunned India and the world, plunging the newborn nation into mourning. Over 2 million attended Gandhi's funeral procession, his body cremated on the banks of the Yamuna River. The killing intensified communal tensions briefly, with riots targeting Hindu nationalist groups, but it also cemented Gandhi's legacy as a martyr for peace. His death spurred global admiration for nonviolence, influencing figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. The site of his death, now Gandhi Smriti, stands as a testament to his enduring ideals, though it also marks the fragility of peace in a divided world. 5. The assassination of John F. Kennedy, a mystery endures. On November 22, 1963, the vibrant optimism of America's Camelot era shattered when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. JFK, the 35th president, embodied youth, charisma, and progress, guiding the nation through the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the early Civil Rights Movement. His visit to Dallas aimed to mend political fences within the Democratic Party ahead of the 1964 election, but it ended in tragedy. The assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was a 24-year-old former Marine with a troubled past and Marxist leanings. Stationed at the Texas School Book Depository along the motorcade route, Oswald fired 3 shots from a 6.5mm Carcano rifle at 12:30 p.m. as Kennedy's open-top limousine passed through Dealey Plaza. 2 bullets struck the president, one in the upper back, exiting his throat, and another in the head, causing Ji Ming injuries. Texas Governor John Connally, riding in the same car, was also wounded but survived. Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 1:00 p.m. Oswald fled the scene but was arrested 70 minutes later after killing Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. 2 days later, on November 24th, as Oswald was being transferred to jail, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot him dead on live television, fueling speculation of a cover-up. The Warren Commission, established to investigate, concluded in 1964 that Oswald acted alone, but its findings, based on the single bullet theory, have been debated ever since. Conspiracy theories abound, implicating the CIA, the Mafia, the Soviet Union, or even elements within the U.S. government, driven by Oswald's murky ties to Cuba and the USSR and Ruby's underworld connections. Kennedy's death stunned the world, marking the end of an era of hope. His funeral, watched by millions, saw Jacqueline Kennedy's stoic grace and young John Jr.'s salute etch the tragedy into global consciousness. The assassination accelerated civil rights legislation under Lyndon Johnson but left a void of idealism. Decades later, JFK's death remains a lightning rod for distrust in institutions, with countless books, films, and investigations, like Oliver Stone's JFK, keeping the mystery alive. Dealey Plaza stands as a pilgrimage site, a testament to a moment when America lost its innocence. 6. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. A dream silenced. On April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., the voice of the American Civil Rights Movement, was gunned down on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. At 39, King had become a global symbol of nonviolent resistance, leading the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech, and countless protests against racial injustice. His presence in Memphis supported striking sanitation workers, reflecting his growing focus on economic equality alongside racial justice. The assassin, James Earl Ray, was a 40-year-old petty criminal and white supremacist with a hatred for King's vision of equality. From a boarding house across the street, Ray fired a single .30-06 bullet from a Remington rifle, striking King in the jaw and severing his spinal cord. King collapsed at 6:01 p.m. and was pronounced dead an hour later at St. Joseph's Hospital. Ray fled, embarking on a 2-month international manhunt that ended with his arrest at London's Heathrow Airport on June 8, carrying a fake Canadian passport. He pleaded guilty in 1969, receiving a 99-year sentence, but later recanted, claiming a conspiracy involving a mysterious figure named Raoul. Ray died in prison in 1998, leaving doubts unresolved. King's death ignited riots in over 100 U.S. cities, from Washington, D.C. to Chicago, as grief and rage boiled over. His funeral in Atlanta drew 150,000 mourners, with Coretta Scott King continuing his legacy. The assassination galvanized support for the Fair Housing Act, passed days later, but also exposed the depth of America's racial divide. Conspiracy theories, pointing to the FBI, which had surveilled King or Southern segregationists, persist, fueled by Ray's retraction and a 1999 civil suit won by King's family against alleged conspirators. King's martyrdom cemented his status as an icon of justice, his words echoing in movements worldwide, while the Lorraine Motel, now the National Civil Rights Museum, honors a dream cut short but never extinguished. Here are 5 assassinations that shook history. Do you know any other infamous assassinations? Leave their names in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.